Good evening, everyone. My name is Dean Hanks. I'm the Vice President of Development here at Bellarmine Prep, and we're so pleased that you could join us on this special and solemn day where we honor our veterans. We're looking forward to hearing from our presenters this evening. We will allow time at the end for question and answers or comments from other members of the military and talk about your service. So we will have time for that. Excuse me. And now it's my pleasure to do as we always do at Bellarmine, open with a prayer and to hear from our Jesuit superior of the Bellarmine community, Father Nachono. Father Ono.
Thank you, Dean. On this Veterans Day, we honor and give thanks for all veterans who have served our country in the military services. And I think we also need to honor those who are on active duty personnel who will one day become veterans. The men and women in the military commit themselves to the values of loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. That is, I think, to say duty, honor, and country. And they do that under an oath to the Constitution. And I think these values might resonate with the mission statement of Bellarmine Prep. And I think that there's a certain kind of connection for those who have gone to Bellarmine or those who have worked at Bellarmine and continue to serve on the board there. St. Ignatius of Loyola, who founded the Jesuits, was a man of the court, but also he was a soldier, a man of action. And I think that there are many parallels when we start talking about the military services in the Jesuits. A chain of command. We think of the commander-in-chief more or less as the Pope, I guess. And then we have a superior general. I think the military takes an oath to the constitutions, and we have our own constitutions that St. Ignatius developed. We have vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but also there's that oath to defend the Constitution. And I think that the military people are sent all over the world, as Jesuits are. And so that there is a sense of service that is part of the Ignatian tradition. For we know that while he was, St. Ignatius was rallying his forces in defense of the citadel of Pamplona, his leg was shattered by a cannonball. And I think that veterans recognize also that there is the possibility that they may give their lives in service for their country. And I think that that is the connection. It's deeds and not merely words. So veterans, I believe, will also recognize this prayer that I want to end in my own opening remarks. So let's take a moment. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will, all I have and possess. You have given all to me. To you, Lord, I return it. All is yours. Dispose of it wholly according to your will. Give me only your love and your grace, and that is enough for me. And so, loving God, we ask you to bless these veterans who honor us with their service and their dedication to honor country and to God. We ask all these things in your name, Jesus the Lord, in the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father Ono. And so now we'd like to do, I think you have the ability to unmute yourself. I know we have some of our guests out there who have served in the military or are currently serving in the military. And before we begin with our panelists, we'd like to give you the opportunity just to identify yourself. And so we can properly thank you for your service to our country. So if you are a past service member or current service member, feel free to unmute yourself and just tell us who you are and your service background.
Robert Beatty, class of 1984, United States Marine Corps, 1985 to 1992.
Welcome and thank you for your service.
Indy
Alan
Valley,
Morris.
class of 1968, career Navy 1972 to 1992.
Welcome and thank you. Al Morris, I see you on there.
Yeah, I was graduated from Bellarmine in 57, Gonzaga in 61, went over to Nuremberg, Germany when the Berlin Wall went up. Spent a couple of years there, had a wonderful experience, wonderful time, and ended up with a wonderful bride that we've been married for 57 years, and I'll be 58 here, I think, in January. So all's gone well.
Thank you. I see one other guest in uniform. You want to go ahead and tell?
Hello. I'm a recent graduate. I graduated from Bellarmine at 2020. Right now I'm in West Point. So I'm technically not serving, but I just got back from study hall and I just want to hop in and say hello.
We're so glad you're with us, and thank you and blessings to you. Anybody else out there that wants to talk about their time in the service? Well, we welcome everybody this evening. We'd like to get right into our program, and I'd love to start with our first presenter. It's Yvonne Combs, a member of the Bellarmine board and a proud graduate of St. Leo's, class of 67. And Ms. Combs was also a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, retired. So we'll kick things off with Yvonne.
Thanks, Dean. As I mentioned to you before, 15 minutes is nothing to one who gabs a good deal by nature. So I'm going to follow the script. And the first thing I'm going to say to you is good, better, best. Never let them rest. Keep up till your good is better and your better is your best. That's the first time I heard challenge in the words of some nun somewhere, I think probably at Holy Rosary. And it always stayed with me throughout my time in the military. I served from 1974 to 1995, I think it was 1995. And was there when the wall went down, Alan, when the Berlin Wall went down. So we have that in common. I guess what I really learned as a young person at St. Leo, and particularly from an all-women's environment, was to stand my ground, to speak my truth. And we were all girls, and so that made it more imperative and certainly a little bit easier, I think, because we were competing against ourselves, really, and amongst ourselves. And so that was one thing that I found as I, entered an all-male army in 1974. I was commissioned a WAC, Women's Army Corps. Don't have that anymore. That was 2 years before the integration of women into the military, meaning also that the women were now eligible to enter ROTC. So I was at that point prepared by the nuns to enter an all-male world and a male-dominated profession, basically. It wasn't easy. I can tell you that. It was very confusing. And, the primacy was to be a soldier. And so at that time, we didn't have separate uniforms. We had the same uniforms that the men had, and they didn't really fit all that well. And then certainly and at some point in time going forward, we had women who became pregnant and they really didn't fit. So someone decided that maybe we needed to make uniforms for women. And that's, I got to see all that and the conversations about women in combat and how do we do the gender thing with the toilets and how do we go to the field with women? That's going to be a big mess and a big problem. So I got a chance to see all those transitions, and particularly from the eyes of a female, but I was also challenged to become and to be and to affirm and to establish myself as someone who would, if necessary, lead men into battle. And I think that was really very challenging and trying to determine who I wanted to be, not only as a commissioned officer in the United States Army, but as a leader and as a woman in that environment. So as a career, I had jobs I liked and some that I didn't like. I mean, that was really, really true. When I gained more rank, then I was able to have more autonomy, of course. And I understood how important it was to be prayerful. And as I mentioned to you before, it was a genuinely challenging time because we didn't have a blueprint. We were the first women who were in the military, full-fledged and fully integrated. And so we just didn't have a blueprint. And we only had each other. So what I did is I put on my desk at that time, I think it's still called the Daily Word. And every day I read the Daily Word. And whatever that message for the day was, that's what I tried to carry with me. And I learned to go into the silence. And this comes from years of being at St. Leo, going to mass every day and praying the rosary. And now we call it discernment, but I learned to go into the silence. And those are the practices that I brought forward and through to my military career. And they really did save most of what I think is my sanity. It still remains, but it was challenging. And I think if I had not had that foundation through the parochial school experience, I probably wouldn't have been able to survive it. And there were women who, for various reasons, finished basic training and said, that's it. You know, I'm done with this. I don't care. It may be the best thing since sliced bread, but I'm not going to do it. The other thing that I think was an advantage to developing my own personal comfort level in that particular arena was the fact that, unlike some of my peers, some of the people that graduated high school and gone into teaching and different things, because there were only a couple of things you could do in those days as a woman, but I always had the same wage as the men. So that brought a lot of leverage to whatever it was that I did. And I wasn't penalized for being a woman because I had the same rank, then I got paid the same amount of money. And the nuns taught me to, as I said, stand my ground. I mean, I've been this close up on some guy yelling in my face. It was not fun. And I worked for people who had spittle running out of their mouths because they were so furious. And it was challenging. I have to say that. And then going into the silence, and then one miraculous day, somebody said to me, and this was after I had retired, as a matter of fact, she said, you know, you strike me as being a compassionate leader. And so I have to say that I think that compassion was given to me by my Catholic education and by the faith that I carried with me, because I do think that you can be in that environment and still be compassionate. I think you have to be compassionate in order to love upon your soldiers and to lead them in a way that makes sense to them. And I think that's certainly one of the things that we learned growing up in the Catholic faith and in Catholic schools. Now, how am I doing, Melissa, for time? Are you timing me? Okay. And then one of the most compassionate things I think I did as a leader, and this was more management, was that I went into this at Berlin, as a matter of fact. I was the first and only female personnel officer in the days when we were kind of winding down, the wall had fallen and that sort of thing. But I did a thing called total quality management, which looked really girly to the chief of staff. He was not happy. And that was where I did a collaborative thing. When I brought my warrant officers and everybody in, I said, okay, look, I need to know how to run this unit in a way that makes sense. And I don't know everything there is to know about life and life in the military. Some of you guys have been in the military much longer than I have. So we sat down, we went off site, down to the Wannsee, I think it was, over there in Berlin. We had access to a nice little cubby there, and sat down and we came up with the plan. And that plan was for us to flatten the organization, meaning that the only time they came to talk to me was when they thought they had to say no. And so I reserved that right to say no. And things ran very smoothly, and I was very grateful for that. And then I'm going to tell this little story. I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was in Berlin. And the fact that I had the ability to rely on my subordinates made it possible for me to enjoy, if that's possible, my illness, and the organization ran effectively. But don't think I didn't pray through that time. And I visualized, my friends and family holding hands and circling me, and that got me through that period. And I had a very, again, compassionate leaders. I had people who were my bosses who said to me, "Are you coming back?" And I said, "I will be back." I went to Walter Reed and came back because I was determined not to be in Walter Reed, because that's where cadavers go. So that's pretty much my military career. And then post-military, when I retired, I kind of spent a couple of years trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then one day when I had an aha moment, again, going into the silence, and decided that now was the time I wanted to go and get my PhD. Did not want to study social stratification. It was just too obvious. But the serendipity of the situation required that I do that. So I did that, did my 6 years in graduate school, came out. I go, okay, well, now what do I do with this degree? Decided I wanted to go to a university where there were predominantly Black students. Taught there for about 5 years. And once again, I'm going, okay, so I got this kind of degree, doesn't make any sense to me. And came back to Tacoma to reconnect with my family, and still looking for things to do, and then there you are, Vern. Hello, I see you. So Vern Harkin said to me, would you be interested? And I said, yes, it's time for me to serve, continue to serve. I mean, I served my country. I loved that. It was a great party, guys. I got to tell you that much. I had some good times. And then Vern asked me to serve, and I said, yes, I owe that to the organizations and the people. Some of them are gone now, who gave me the ability, the strength to plow through, soldier on through the military as one of the first group of women. So that's my story. I hope I've been succinct enough and haven't taken up too much of the oxygen. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Yvonne. It was a pleasure to learn more about you. And now it's really an honor to introduce our next presenter, Colonel Greg Allen, a U.S. Army retired, Bellarmine class of '84, and also a member of the Bellarmine board. Colonel Allen.
Thanks, Dean. Hey, first off, I just to Mr. Morris, go artillery, and to Mr. Crowley, even though you are Navy, definitely want to say thank you for your service. I would like to recognize as well my classmate from Bellarmine, Bob Beatty, hoorah, I guess that's what the Marines say. And I'd also like to recognize Elliot, who's currently at my alma mater. So hopefully we'll end soon here, so you don't miss bed check. And then to the aspiring officers, I believe we have both Peter and CJ that are currently seniors at Bellarmine. So I appreciate you guys jumping on. And then Andrew Jesse, who's currently at Gonzaga. I hope this is a route that you decide to go as well. And if I missed anybody, I apologize, but just wanted to throw some shout outs real quick. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go through my military career, talk a little bit about how faith and things that I learned from Bellarmine helped steer my career, and then I'll follow up with what I'm doing now. So as Dean said, I graduated in 1984. I was fortunate enough to go to the United States Military Academy, where I graduated near the bottom of my class. I still graduated. And my first assignment was at Fort Carson, Colorado, where I spent 2 years in the artillery. And then I transferred to 2nd Ranger Battalion up here at Fort Lewis, where I served as a fire support officer, and then I worked on staff. I left the Rangers thinking I was actually going to get out of the military, and I had someone convince me that since I enjoyed being special operations. I had tried to actually put a packet in to become a JAG officer, and the JAG community said when they saw my grades at West Point, they said, "You're really not what we're looking for." So they said, "Hey, you might want to stay in the infantry grunt world." So I had someone convince me to go Special Forces, which is what I did. And I was again fortunate enough to come right back to Fort Lewis. So I was here at First Special Forces Group. During that time frame, I think my one claim to fame is I had the opportunity in 1996 to be to lead the first American team, or the first ever American soldiers to head into the Republic of Uzbekistan in Central Asia and begin U.S. relations with the Uzbekis. Um, I I ended up going to Delta Force selection, and I made it actually in 1998, and I was going to head down to Bragg. But during that time frame, from after I finished selection until my report date, I met my beautiful bride Heidi, and decided that going to Delta probably wouldn't be a great idea for to try to begin a marriage in North Carolina when I'd probably be gone the entire time. So I turned down that assignment. I stayed at First Group here at Fort Lewis. Um, I was offered a job to command to be actually the first active duty officer, Special Forces officer, to command a National Guard SF unit. And so I did that thinking I'd only do that for 2 years. And then of course 9/11 hit. And then once 9/11 hit, I was actually down at the Joint Readiness Training Center. And I still remember I was actually serving as a battalion S3 at that time for the battalion that I was in. And we had just sent the last team out at about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I told my operations sergeant to not wake me. And it's like, "Hey, I need to get some sleep." And within about an hour, 2 hours, he woke me up and said, "Hey, sir, we got an issue." And and I told him, "So Casey, what don't you understand?" I said, "Hey, I've been up now for going on basically 20 hours. I just need to get some rack." And that's when he told me that the Twin Towers were hit. And at that point, I knew that my career was totally changed. Um, Within a year, my company was sent to Kuwait to train up the Kuwaiti forces in the case, or in the event that Saddam Hussein would invade South. So we were there for 6 months training up the Kuwaitis, and then on March 19th, we got word that, well, we knew by then it was after the new year 2003. We knew that we were going into Iraq. It was just a matter of when. The night before the war, we started sending teams in, and the next day I was gone, and I was part of the initial invasion of Iraq. Upon return from Iraq, I thought by then I had 4 years left for 20 to get to 20 years, and I was offered a job here in Washington State since I had just worked with the National Guard with the Special Forces unit. They asked if I wanted to stay on and become the director of operations, and so that's what I did. I then transferred over to the National Guard full time, and I'm serving as the director of operations and then as the chief of staff. And then during that time, while I was with the Guard, I thought I was only going to do 4 years, but it turned into 11 years. But during that time, I went back to Iraq during 2000, right near the end of the surge. I went back. I had an infantry battalion that I took back to Iraq in 2008, 2009. And then when I became the joint director for the state, I was involved more with emergency response. So I ran missions like a lot of the wildland fires, like if you guys remember the incident in Eastern Washington in Pateros where the town burned down. Was out there that day, which is, I mean, to this day, I still can't forget what that looked like. I mean, it was one thing to see. It's one thing to see damage and destruction in a foreign country, but when you see that in your home state, and you see people that are now homeless, it hurt. I mean, it was hard. And that same year, previously, I was in charge of the Oso mudslide response, and again, that's an event that I'll never forget. I went up there one day within like the first 3 days. I went up there to basically just to be, the senior guy on the ground, and I got in one of the big holes with some firefighters to search for bodies, and sure enough, we found a body. And I never could ever imagine that I would, that I would actually find, that I'd be a part of that. And so I had some great experiences. My last job was chief of staff, and so I had a great experience with the military. I decided to retire in 2015. I knew I wanted my kids to go to Bellarmine and didn't want to move back to DC. So decided to retire, and I don't look back on anything. Physically, I'm pretty much broke in terms of my body, but I've got close to 100 jumps. Like I said, I've got 3 tours, one in Kuwait and 2 in Iraq. Got a lot of miles on my feet, but I physically hurt. But it's okay because I do it all over again. In terms of how faith has helped me, though, throughout my career, I always tell people, there are no atheists in foxholes. There are no racists in foxholes. There are no homophobes in foxholes. Especially when you're overseas in combat, you do a lot of praying. And I can tell you, I was scared and I went out. The worst job in my battalion was being my driver, because we were going out just about every night with different teams, going down range. And so you do a lot of praying, but you have a lot of faith in God, and the faith in God really, you knew, or you prayed that you never really worried about yourself. It was more worrying about your soldiers and your family members at home. And quick war story, I can tell you that in terms of faith, I left the beginning of September of 2002. My oldest daughter, who graduated from Bellarmine a couple years ago, she was a year and a half, or she was actually almost 2 years old. And I left the beginning of September, and within a week, I found out that my wife was pregnant. And again, the internet was relatively new. It wasn't new, but it wasn't like we had email, or you had cell phones where you could talk every day. But I spoke to my wife about once a week. And then we'll never forget the phone call on the 19th of March, 2003. I told my wife, who was then 6 months pregnant, I said, hey, good luck with baby. Hope things turn out good, but I have no idea when I'll ever talk to you again. And I didn't. And it just was silent on the other side of the phone. And we hung up, and I wasn't able to talk to her again until 3 months later in May. And so it's a pretty incredible story. I actually came home the night that my baby was, the night Kelly was born. And so, but my wife went through that by herself with a 2-year-old being pregnant. So again, you have faith in God that he's going to take care of her. You also have faith in God that he's going to take care of your soldiers. Unfortunately, I've lost 8 guys, or actually I've had I had 5 guys that get killed in battle. I had another 3 that I was close to that died in training. And I can't tell you the number of suicides. You know, I have at least one kid basically per every year I was in the military. So at least 27 kids that I know have committed suicide. And that's hard, you know, but again, you have faith in God that he's going to take care of you, you know, that he's going to make you strong. And I attribute a lot of that too, though, to Bellarmine, because at the end of the day, um, you know, being in the military, it's all about being a team. It's all about being on a team. And I can tell you that my best friends today are still the guys I met um, back in August, the first day of 2 days, but back in August of 1990, or excuse me, 81, when we started football practice. You know, you develop this teamwork, and I learned that at Bellarmine. I saw it at Bellarmine as a community, whether it was football or wrestling or just school in general, just that the entire community is so close. Well, it's the same with the military. I mean, you rely on guys, you rely on women, you rely on the families. It's a community, and so that's one of the things that I took away from Bellarmine. It was just a lot like being in the military. What else did I learn? Um, And then last month I heard Coach Jensen talk about you know what he in terms of faith and you know how that related to football, and he talked about love, and I can tell you that it's the same. It's the same thing in the military. I mean, there is no greater love than to sacrifice yourself for your buddy. And at the end of the day, it isn't necessarily about fighting for your country, you know, waving that flag. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's really about taking care of the kid on your left and on your right. You know, whether again, that's why I always say there are no atheists in foxholes. It doesn't make a difference if you're black, you're white, you're Asian, you're Catholic, you're Protestant. It doesn't make a difference if you're Jewish or you're you know, whatever. I mean, bottom line, at the end of the day, it's about taking care of one another, and that love that you see between people, it's incredible. And so I definitely agree with Coach Jensen on that. He talks about the love between players. It's the same way in the military. Um, so to wrap this up, I retired in 2015. Um, I initially started. I helped the company helped start up a company where we found work, employment opportunities for veterans. That led to me starting my own business where I consult for veteran-owned businesses. I still help veterans find employment opportunities. I pretty much link them up with my friends. Um, and then the same thing for businesses. I help businesses find opportunities, mostly veteran-owned. And now my focus for the last almost 2 years has really been veteran-owned businesses that that focus on emergency supplies and services. And so I've been dealing with COVID for the past year almost now, and I don't know if it's going to get any better, but you know, at least I have job security for a while. My involvement with Bellarmine is I came back when my daughter first started her ninth grade year, my oldest. I ran into Rob. I said, "Hey, I want to get involved." And so I ended up becoming a member with the boosters. And then a couple years later, I became a board member. I've had the opportunity to volunteer. I've been on 3 junior encounters and 2 sophomore retreats. And I can tell you that those have changed my life as well. I mean, just being with these kids is absolutely incredible. Um, and so it's been a good ride for me. And I think that's all I have. So if I took too much time, Dean, I apologize, but that's my story. I'm gonna stick to it. And again,
No,
thank you guys for your service.
and thank you for your service, and thank you for your wonderful chronologue of your history and your service to our country. Our last presenter is our president of Bellarmine, proud member of the Bellarmine class of '82. and Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army retired, Mr. Martorelli.
Thanks, Dean. I'd like to echo what Greg said and thank all of the veterans with us tonight for your service, and those young men who are considering military career or have already begun your first steps on that. Wishing you the best and supporting you from afar, and proud of your service and your willingness to step forward. I'll share a little bit about my journey, and I think a lot of the similar themes that you've heard from the others, because I think those core things that resonate with military service about comradeship, support, that unity that you feel as part of a team. That was at the essence of my experience as well. I started my journey, well, from Bellarmine. I graduated '82. I went to Gonzaga and into the Gonzaga ROTC program, which, as Andrew knows, is the best ROTC program out there. My son also graduated that program much later. Graduated in '86 and was commissioned in armor. And that was by choice. I'd met a cadet who was there, who was a prior service, had been an enlisted guy and was a tanker, and talked me into that. And I loved it. I spent the first 10 years of my career in armor units. I still have a soft spot in my heart for tanks. I like being around big, heavy machines. And I liked that experience a lot. I served 4 years in Germany. I was there when the wall came down also, so full circle with Al's experience there. And served as a platoon leader, company executive officer, motor officer in a tank battalion. Came back to the States and went to the Field Artillery Advanced Course on a branch exchange program. So I spent some time in Oklahoma for that. And then I went to the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, where I served in the OP4 unit. So that's a huge training area out there in the California desert where large mechanized units can do force on force practice. And there's a permanent unit there that represents the enemy. And so we studied Russian doctrine at the time, Soviet doctrine, and we maneuvered our units as Soviet rifle commanders, rifle company commanders, and tank company commanders, and actually commanded battalion-sized units. As a company commander, I was actually commanding a battalion-sized unit of about 56 vehicles when we deployed. And it was a pure tanker's job because US units came through once a month, but we were out there every month and we fought every month. So you basically spent 2 weeks out of every month just being a tanker out in the field. And that's what I had originally joined up and said I wanted to do. And it was probably the highlight of the first half of my military career. And then at a mid-career point, there's a point where you have the opportunity to choose sort of a second specialty. And I had decided I wanted to be what's called a foreign area officer. So that's an officer that goes into a special training program and you become a subject matter expert on a part of the world or a country. And the military provides you with pretty extensive schooling. And then you do subsequent assignments engaging in that work. And I originally thought I would be a Germany fellow. I had studied German at Bellarmine. I'd served in Germany 4 years. I loved it there. I'd done a lot of liaison work with the German military. And I found I really enjoyed that connection across cultures. I really enjoyed the language dynamic. I really enjoyed understanding how different cultures and countries saw the world and helping them understand how we did and bridging that. That's the first thing that connected me back to what Bellarmine had started with me. So it was at Bellarmine where I really started to discover that I really had a passion for languages, for communication, for understanding different points of view and different perspectives on the world and helping build bridges between those. And I had a colonel who had been a commander of mine in Germany who came across. I actually got a chance to defeat him on the battlefield at Fort Irwin, and then have dinner with him afterwards in the officers club. And he said, "Well, look, if you're going to be a foreign area officer, what country are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I was thinking Germany." And he said, you really should, if you're going to do that, you really should do China. So this was in the early 90s. And China hadn't even been on my radar, and it really wasn't even on the world's radar yet. But I took the language tests and aptitude, and I qualified for Chinese, and I thought about it and I said, okay, I'll do that. That was one of the moments that showed me the impact that a mentor or a leader can have on you as a career, because that colonel was farsighted, visionary, and he realized that was the future challenge for our country, and that was a great place for me to refocus my career. So I went to language school in Monterey. I studied Chinese for a year and a half. Then I went to graduate school at Harvard. I got a master's degree in East Asian studies. And then I went and lived in China and ultimately ended up working in China for about 5 years. I lived in Beijing, got the opportunity to travel all over China. And it was just me and 3 other military officers, two Army and 1 Marine Corps officer. Studied Chinese at university in Beijing and literally traveled to just about every corner of China. Just our whole mission that year was to learn Chinese and to understand China. So we went into small towns and off the beaten track and got to know the country pretty intimately. At the time, in an army of 475,000 people, there were 4 people that had my skill set. And that's the kind of thing that this colonel had foreseen, was this reality that there were very few people. There were a lot of guys that could speak German. There were very few guys that could speak Chinese, and even less that understood anything about China. That was a useful lesson for me as well, because I realized being able to think forward about where you need to be rather than focusing on just where you are was critical for positioning my career and for positioning where the Army needed the support. So I did those years in Beijing, and then I was assigned as the Army attaché in Hong Kong. I spent 3 years there. And that's working for the Defense Intelligence Agency. So we do military diplomacy, and we pay attention to what's going on in China, and we help people back in Washington, D.C., policymakers, understand Chinese policymaking and make U.S. policy reflective of that. I had some great opportunities in that role. I got to work the visit of President Clinton to China in 1998. It was first experience working directly with the White House and the advanced teams for that visit. I got to escort the vice chairman of the Chinese Military Commission on his visit to the United States. He was the highest ranking Chinese officer ever to visit the US at the time. And I was the escort officer and translator for him on that visit. So I had some opportunities to really meet some remarkable people and see policymaking and diplomacy at the highest level, which was all a result of the opportunity that the military had given me. And it was right in line with that firm belief I had that the critical thing for us is to understand the countries we deal with, understand the people and culture we deal with, not the way that we want them to be, but to see the world the way that they do, and then help our people understand that so that we make policy decisions and diplomatic initiatives in the real world and not in the world that we project or that we hope is out there. I finished my career in the Pentagon. I ended up as chief of the Asia Pacific branch for Army International Relations, working for the Chief of Staff of the Army, and I got to accompany him on visits to almost every major country in East Asia over 4 years. And then I retired in 2006. In that job, I was the first U.S. Army officer to go to the Jureha Army Training Center in Inner Mongolia. The Chinese, when they first opened international observers to that, I was the one of 2 officers selected to go as a U.S. Army representative to that. So I continued to have these great opportunities to really get to know and understand China, and then to help U.S. decision makers see what China was about and understand the world through Chinese eyes, so that we can make hopefully intelligent diplomacy decisions. But again, it was that whole focus on connecting and understanding. And that's something that Jesuit education and that Bellarmine had really planted that seed in me. This focus on empathy, this focus on the ability to think logically, to reason critically, to look at things from multiple angles, and then to come up with practical ideas and solutions for how problems can be resolved, and how communities can be built around those common understandings. I also found the military was a great laboratory for leadership. I served under a huge range of leaders and saw lots of different leadership styles. I saw some that worked and some that definitely did not. And I was able to learn a lot. And so the other thing that came out of the Jesuit education for me was this habit of being a lifelong learner and being an introspective person who's constantly looking at yourself, looking at your own thinking and decision-making processes, looking at how you can continue to improve yourself and learn from what you're experiencing. We call that today the Ignatian pedagogy. The reality is it's that habit of discernment. It's that habit of reflection, going through experience, reflecting on it afterwards, and then taking action to implement what you've learned. And the military was an outstanding opportunity to do that, because you meet so many people in so many different situations, and you really see, and often under very stressful conditions, and you really get to see the impact of different leadership styles and different ways of thinking. And it really helps you refine your own leadership style and your own way of approaching the world. So I retired in 2006, and I, like Mr. Allen said, I wanted my kids to go to Bellarmine. So I came back here, and I was fortunate to get a position with a business organization in Seattle that does business in the Asia Pacific region. So my experience there ported over, doing diplomacy and policy work, but this time it was more on trade policy and business rather than security issues. But again, I spent the next 6 years or so traveling all over Asia and working at the highest levels in the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Organization, which culminates every year in a summit event with 21 heads of state. I had experience working around presidential level events and working with staffs at that level. So it was a skill that I was able to port over to civilian life. But as my children got more involved with Bellarmine, I felt myself getting drawn back into Bellarmine as well. And eventually was invited to serve on the finance committee of the board. My background in strategic planning and long range, sort of developing long range visions and organizational plans served me in that capacity. And I was invited to serve on strategic planning committee for Bellarmine. And then ultimately, when the position for president opened, I did a lot of discernment around it and thought maybe this was an opportunity for me to bring that skill set back to a place that started me on that journey and meant so much to me. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is both in the military, when I was in Asia, and in the private sector, government and businesses and nonprofits are desperately looking for young men and women with the skill set that Jesuit education produces. And I realized that there's such a shortage of people out there with the superior education, the ability to think critically, the ability to communicate effectively, but that are informed by a Christian worldview, by a firm center in understanding others and in building communities. And that's exactly what Bellarmine starts and what Jesuit education does throughout Bellarmine and Gonzaga for me. And so the opportunity to come back and serve this place, which is in the very business of producing what I know the world so desperately needs, was what motivated my calling to come back ultimately. Part of what happens when you're in the military for 20 years, you really get addicted to being in an organization that's got a driving mission that you really believe in. And you really come to where I just can't really give myself to an organization that's not passionate or doesn't really believe in what it's doing and that it aligns with my values. I had a lot of fun working international business, trade policy work. But at the end of the day, after 5 years, I came home to my wife and said, it's really fun. I love traveling. I love talking to the Australians and working with the Thais and whatever. But at the end of the day, you're basically helping Procter & Gamble sell more toothpaste, in Thailand. And that's great for Procter & Gamble, and it's good, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not enough to get me out of bed in the morning. It's not enough for me to say, yeah, that's what I want to do. That's what really gets me going. But being in a place that's training and developing young men and women to go out and be agents of change and servant leaders in the world, like the people I served with, like the people that are on this Zoom tonight, that's something that gets me motivated to get out of bed in the morning. And that's something that Bellarmine is dedicated to, and Jesuit education has been dedicated to for over 400 years. So I feel phenomenally blessed to be here. I feel phenomenally blessed by my whole opportunity in the military. I think the military was a great experience for me. I haven't regretted any of it. It challenges you, it tests you, but you learn a lot about yourself, and you really build those friendships for life that are always there. If I could ever get back on a tank, I wouldn't say no to that. I do enjoy that, but other than that, I'm pretty happy where I am. Anyway, Dean, that's my story, and thanks for the opportunity to share it.
Thank you, all three of you. Can we get some virtual applause for our panelists this evening? They were all fantastic. And we do have a few minutes. You can either put a question in the chat and Melissa and I will look at it, or if you want, just sort of raise your hand or unmute yourself in order and we can, yes, go ahead and Elliot, go ahead. And Lee, yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Actually, I got a bunch of questions, but I'll try and shorten it down.
Pick the best one.
Yeah, so I want to get one for Ms. Combs. I understand that you've been an officer for quite some time, and like you've experienced a lot of diversity within the Women's Army Corps. What are some good leadership qualities that you would like to share with us that you've been able to experience?
Well, I think it's important, first of all, for you to be trustworthy. I think the people that you lead want to be able to trust you. So that means you've got to have a skill set. You've got to know what they do, and also know what your responsibilities are. I think that's extremely important to build that trust in them. And I think you have to trust them as well. They want to trust you, but you also have to trust them. So there's this mutual relationship that's built on trust, and it's invaluable because those are the people that you're going to rely on to take care of you in the combat. Believe me, paper was combat in some ways, and they're looking for you to take care of them as well. So I think that's paramount, trust and honesty. I mean, I can appreciate when I mess up, and I didn't have a flawless time. I mean, there were things that I stumbled across and stumbled over, and I appreciated candor. I think that's important. And I also, in turn, was candor with not only my subordinates, but also with my, with the people who were my bosses. And sometimes it didn't work very well. I mean, I can tell you one little quick story. I was a postal officer there in Würzburg, which was part of the 3rd Infantry Division. And this one star had put the wrong letter, or put a letter in the mail. And I was a postal officer, and the lieutenant colonel that I worked for, asked me to retrieve that letter from the mail. No, sir, I cannot retrieve the letter from the mail. Number one, it's illegal, and you've just given me an order that's illegal. Well, it really wasn't a very pleasant time. He was looking to take care of this general, and I was looking to not go to jail, which my dad promised me was going to happen at some point because I was always running my mouth. And it was tough. It was tough to stand the ground. And ultimately what happened is I go to my office one day and there's the new postal officer walking in the door. I had no way of knowing that was going to happen. Now, I will say this, years later, when I ran across the colonel, he said, I did the wrong thing and I need to apologize to you. That doesn't always happen, but it does happen. So I do think that it's very important to follow what you know is right. And it's not always going to be easy. And some days you're going to go, God, did I do the right thing?
Elliot?
I did my best.
Thank you. Other questions?
Well, I have a comment for Elliot. And I had a driver in Nuremberg who loved to go over the wall, AWL. And so he had some problems. And he was a younger guy. I had a sergeant who was an alcoholic. He obviously had problems. And they were in my company. And I actually reached out to them and found that that was effective. So if you have that opportunity, don't pass it up. I do want to mention one other thing that I experienced, which I don't reveal to just anybody, but in as much as we're one of the same, all in the same here. I was what they called a special weapons officer in an artillery unit. And I think some of you guys know what that's all about. And the Pentagon was coming over to test our unit and other units like ours. And we had fair warning of that. And my captain did not understand what we did in that vault. And on a Saturday morning, when we got off work at noon, he said, bring your men in. I want to see what you do. And, it'll take a couple hours. So, I'm not going to disobey my commanding officer. So Saturday at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock rolled around, 4:30 finally said, let your men go and be back here Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. And I want to just go over a few more things and, get into more detail. Well, this noontime came and he said, bring your men back at 1 o'clock. So 4:30 came around on Sunday, and Monday was a holiday. I don't know whether it was 4th of July or Labor or Memorial Day, whatever. But so Sunday night, he said, bring your men back. So he left. I gathered the guys and I said, tomorrow's a holiday, go have a good time. Well, Tuesday morning, he was standing at the head of the stairs with his hands on his hips as I was coming up the steps. And he and I were physically the same build and I guess physique. And although being a VMI guy that he was, he probably could have taken me down in a minute, but he said, get in my office right now, in that tone of voice. So we got in there and he got behind his desk and I was standing in front of him. And I wasn't prepared for this, but I was just cool and calm. And at the head of the stairs, because he had his fists just clenched as tight as could be. And I suddenly went into the same mode because I thought to myself, is this going to be a punch out with my office, senior officer? The reason I'm telling you all of this, well, let me finish the story. Bottom line, he says, I could court martial you right now. And I had no response to that. But he said, but, and as soon as he said, but, I knew that my ass was saved because I was the chief cook and bottle washer in that vault that was going to give him a superior rating on his efficiency report if we did well in this test with the Pentagon coming over and going through the routine with us. It so happened that we did get a very high mark. I think it was 97.5 out of 100. So he called me in the office a week later and he said, you did really well. He says, I hope you consider making the military your career. He says, because on your efficiency report, I'm going to give you a 10 on everything, which is the highest level. The reason I want to emphasize this is because I think I did the wrong thing. I think he would have said that anyway. But because I stood up to him, maybe he appreciated me doing that. However, I don't know that until after the fact. Well, 2 weeks after that, after he told me that, I went and saw the colonel in charge of the battalion and said, sir, I've done this and this and this. I'd like to move on and see what else because quite frankly, I wanted to get as far away as I could from that guy. Brickner was his name, Mr. VMI that could do no wrong and, follow the book to the T, etc. So be conscious, be prepared, and best of luck.
Thanks, Al. Vern, you had a quick
And
question?
I didn't expect to talk.
I know we're short on time, just a very quick comment. I didn't serve in the military, but I've really enjoyed the opportunity tonight to hear from Yvonne and Greg and Rob, who I've all known for some time. I respect their experiences, their service, and congratulate them for their service, as well as for all of the other military folks on here. But my observation is these Bellarmine get-togethers really provide an opportunity for connections. And last time we were on dealing with football and homecoming, things happening on Memorial Field. And I see my old friend, Indy Crowley, class of 68, year behind me. Indy was one of the best trainers that Bellarmine probably ever had. Taped a lot of ankles, took care of football and basketball players, dealing with their aches and pains. Haven't seen Indy in many, many years, but I really appreciate the opportunity that this provides for me and others to see old classmates, old friends. So hello to Indy.
May I
Good to
tell
see
a
you, buddy.
quick humorous story here?
Please.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm over time. So anyway, I'm getting ready for one of my assignments, and the detailer, that's what we call him in the Navy, says, Lieutenant Crowley, we want to send you as our liaison to the Greek Navy. And I'm saying, well, that's back when we were still sending liaisons to the Greek Navy. And I said, well, what's my qualifications to go to the Greek Navy? Well, it says in your high school transcript that you speak Greek. And that had to do with the fact that back in those days, that Hellenic Greek was one of the courses you could take in high school. I said, well, I can probably talk to Socrates, but I'm not sure I can talk to anybody in the Greek Navy. So he sent me to Italy instead.
Because you took Latin as well.
That's exactly right.
That's great.
So there's your Bellarmine education paying off in ways you didn't expect.
How about one more quick one from Peter? I thought you had your hand up, Peter. One of our seniors is looking to go in. Pete, you want to unmute yourself, Peter, and ask a question and comment?
Yes, and this one was a question for Miss Combs there, and it was with the values that you mentioned learning from your service and kind of that adversity you had to overcome. How would you say your faith and your background with the private school, with the Catholic school, helped you then, and how that inspired you even today, and how your service has inspired you working today with this community and with us here?
That's a tough question. Let me think about this just a second here. So as I understand it, what did I do when I got into tough spots, and how does that connect with my faith? Is that what you're asking me, Mr. Conley?
Yes, and how has that inspired you to still help today in situations like coming and meeting with us and talking about your service?
Well, I think I had a conversation with Mr. Mottarelli, and no matter what happens, I think for me, there's always this notion that I am in service to something greater than myself. And I try to remember that. Now, my husband would argue that I have a huge ego. Okay, I earned it, is what I tell him. I have this huge ego. But I do have a strong commitment to seeing what I can do to make the world a better place. And it doesn't necessarily, I think that comes from my faith. I mean, I believe that it does. And it shows up in some pretty strange ways. I had the great honor of holding the hands of a woman who was dying a couple of weeks ago. And that was very, very challenging for me It was physically draining and I was ill afterwards. But I just listened for what I needed to do, and I knew I needed to hold her hand. And so what I do, when I think about it, I try not to think about it. I try to listen. I just try to listen to the thing that's inside of me and to be open to that. I hope that answers your question. I think that for me, it is very challenging sometimes to want to, I'm an introvert by nature, believe it or not, to want to just sequester someplace and go hide somewhere. But I try to stand in what I've been taught, which is not always going to be the easiest thing to execute. And I realize that. But I'll tell you one other little quick story. Growing up here in Tacoma, when I was a very young person here in South Tacoma, over there by Visitation, we used to live right behind, kind of by Lincoln. And I remember I don't think I'd had First Communion. I'm not really sure. But I came back and I don't know if I was crying or my brother was crying. And my dad said to me, I don't know what happened with that kid down the end of the block, and I don't really care. But you go down there and you fix it. And I came home to my dad. I don't remember what I did, but he said, nobody runs you off your block. And that's kind of what I've done all my life is I just tried not to let people run me off my block, and I felt like every block was my block because there was going to be somebody who needed my help. And that's what I try to do. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it, which is kind of arrogant, I suppose. Everybody doesn't need my help, but then I try to help anyway, So yeah, I try to think like that. And I think that came from the nuns who just said, hey, what are you doing? Explain to me what you're doing. And you stood there and you explained it to them. Yes, sister, no, sister, this is what I'm doing. They taught me to talk.
Let's get one more quick question. I know we're running late, but CJ's got his hand up and let's hear from him.
Yeah, so this is kind of a question for anyone who wants to answer this, but so like Peter and I, we are aspiring officers applying to multiple service academies. And for me personally, one of the questions that's come up in many of my interviews that's been a little tough for me to answer is, have I ever disagreed with anyone in authority who has asked me to do something? And how did I handle that? Or how did I go about that? So I kind of want to pose that question to you guys. And for my further knowledge and further answering of that question, and hopefully my future in the military, I want to be able to react in a way, in a positive way, even if I don't agree with something. I want my reaction and the way I handle that situation to be, in good manner. So my question to you guys is, have you guys ever faced something like that, and how did you handle it? So anybody.
Greg or Rob, you want to tackle that one? You're both laughing. You must have come up against it at one point.
The reason I'm laughing is there's a reason I retired as a colonel and not general.
I hear that.
I mean, the military, I mean, it's designed the way it's designed. I mean, it's there for a purpose. And I'm not going to say I will, and I'm going to agree with both Rob and what Yvonne had said earlier. There are some leaders that you're going to have a different philosophy. You're going to have different ideas, but at the end of the day, if you're not in charge, I mean, for the most part, as a lieutenant, you're going to be, you're a platoon leader. The way that I dealt with it, even as a lieutenant, you start making it through the ranks, is is one, first listen, because just because you think you might know the answer, it might not be the answer. You might not know what the big picture is. There might be a reason why your boss is telling you to do something that you disagree with. Now, obviously, if it's an illegal order, like Yvonne said, then you should stand up. And there are times where you might put your career on the line And it's okay, because at the end of the day, it's about integrity. It's about doing the right thing. It's about doing the right thing all the time. And and it's having those that the intestinal fortitude to do the right thing. And so, again, you may disagree with your boss. I definitely, if you have an issue, then take it up with them outside of of your soldiers, so they don't see it. But have that discussion with them. And at the end of the day, if he doesn't agree with you, you've got two choices. You can drive on, or you can say, I totally disagree with this. And the reason I'm bringing this up is this has actually happened. This has happened at the national level. I mean, it happened back in 2000, 2002, 2003. General Shinseki, who was a West Point grad, he retired from the military because he disagreed with the fact that at the time they were talking about the troop strength of the amount of soldiers going into combat or needed for combat. And he felt, along with Colin Powell, who'd already retired, that they needed more soldiers. Well, General Shinseki made his, he said he basically went up to, I forget who the 4-star was, but he made he made his point saying, hey, we need more soldiers. And he disagreed, but at the same time, at the end of the day, he wasn't in charge, and so he retired. It's the same thing, not to get into politics, but it's the same thing with even General Mattis. You see retired General Mattis as the Secretary of Defense. He disagreed with his boss. He made it known to his boss, but his boss still said, this is what I'm going to do. And at the end of the day, you can salute and drive on, or you can salute and say, you know what, based on my own beliefs, maybe it's time that I walk away. But I think the last thing you want to do is not cause hate and discontent. It's one of those things where, again, it's all about integrity. It's about doing the right thing. And I'll let Rob chime in, because I'm sure he's got some views on this as well.
Well, I mean, you captured it pretty well, Greg. I think the first thing you deal with, though, is there's a difference between being asked to do something you don't agree with and being asked to do something wrong, right? And that discernment is your first step. And if you recognize, it's not that you're not being asked to do something illegal or something wrong, it's just you think this is not a smart thing to do, or not the right course of action, or not what you would do, and then you got to go, as Greg said, and step back and say, do I have all the information to really make that decision? Because honestly, your supervisors, your superiors, your commanders have more information than you, and chances are they've considered all those things you're thinking about, and they've made the decision that this is what we're going to do. Now, you're never wrong to stand up and say, assuming it's an environment in which you can do that, and not all commanders are going to give you that, but to say, sir, have we considered this? Have we considered that? Is this? But if the commander is taking care of communicating effectively what needs to be accomplished, and you recognize that you may not agree with it, but it's not wrong. He's not asking you to do anything wrong or illegal or anything that's going to unnecessarily challenge your responsibilities to take care of your people and your mission. Then it's kind of what you signed up for, and so you really do have to have a pretty developed sense of discernment. That's another reason why I think the grounding that I think Jesuit education gives really helps you navigate moments like that, because it gives you a moral center to say whether or not something is right or wrong. And then it also gives you the ability to engage and when things don't make sense to you, or they're not things you agree with. And how do you engage moving forward to resolve those issues? I had plenty of examples of being asked or told to do stuff that I thought was not smart. Never anything illegal or that I considered to be an unlawful order. I won't say never, but very, very seldom. And usually if you point out, hey, sir, that's illegal, then sort of the order changes. But but a lot of times to say, why would we choose this course of action? Why would we, in foreign policy, it happens all the time. And part of the challenge with being a China guy was you can give the chief of staff of the army the best advice you can on what the policy to China should be. But you're just one piece of information for him. He's getting data from all kinds of other sources, and he comes out with a policy decision that's 180 out from what you think we need to do. There's a tension there, right? I would feel times I need to push back. I need to, I need to correspond. I need to get an appointment. I need to go in there and say, sir, this isn't a good decision, and here's why. And there's other times where I get it. He's got my information and he still decided what he needs to do. And now my job becomes how to make that his chosen course of action work as successfully as possible. I was never in combat situation. And Colonel Allen can talk much more clearly to that. But the career prepares you for that. And you love your unit and you love your guys and you have a sacred mission to take care of them and protect them. But you also acknowledge the reality in your job that you may be ordered to send them into situations where their lives may be lost or where they may be wounded or broken. And you still have a responsibility and you have to have the ability to do that if your command orders you to do that. I never faced that test in quite that way. Not in a physical warfare kind of way. There's things that happen on the intelligence side that are a little bit different too, and you face other moral quandaries there too. But the ability to reconcile that challenge, where sometimes what you're being asked to do is going to risk yourself or others, and you have to be able to say that my objection to that order isn't just grounded in that unwillingness to do that. You have to have that higher understanding of when the mission calls you to do it, your job becomes how to figure out how to do it. Anyway, that's kind of a scattershot approach there, but I think it's a really great question because you will face those situations. You absolutely will. And how you handle them defines you as an officer and as a person, and in a lot of ways sets the path of your career.
One more from our friend who's at West Point. Who's got lots of questions, but we can probably squeeze in one more.
Oh, sorry. I just want to add on to the comment of, or CJ and Peter's comment about West Point. I don't know about Navy or Air Force or Coast Guard. Like, I don't know how they run, but for sure, West Point is a learning block. So right here in West Point, cadets run a lot of things. So people obviously make mistakes here. And my past life, I've never really stood up to authority until now. So basically what I'm trying to say is when you come here, you will learn how to stand up to authority, like your battalion commander or maybe your squad leader, like those type of people, you can stand up to them, but you just have to be respectful about it. And it really was challenging for me because like I see a lot of mistakes that do happen. You have to correct it on the spot, or like when they pass down an order that isn't really like, that's like borderline, like, is this like right or is this wrong? So like you have to confirm with them, see that it's really a confidence shaker, but it will affect you greatly in your military career. So I just want to point out that West Point does develop leaders of character like that, and it would be awesome to have you here.
Yeah, and it works both ways too, remember, because chances are you'll give orders at some point that the guys working for you are going to push back. And you know, the example that you set for how you handle that is what they're going to learn, and it's what they're going to do. And it's just as important to be able to manage that side of it. And I can't go, Dean, without putting in a plug for RTC, because I know there's all this academy stuff going on here, but I got to tell you, RTC is a great path for a military career. And so those of you choosing that as well, congratulations, you've chosen well, and I know you'll go on to great success.
So I just have to add in something about humility. So I recall, you know, when you're aboard a ship and it's a small, compact, noisy, rocking thing called a destroyer. And there was many times my department head as a young officer would just frustrate the holy hell out of me. And I recall storming away a couple of times, and I was walking past the armory because I was the gunnery officer, and I was listening to a couple of my sailors storming and raging about me. So I'm thinking, So I kind of think my department head needs to learn a few things, and I was humbled by the fact that I had a couple of enlisted guys who were thinking about the same thing about me. So it just could be, before, as the question CJ was asked of you, the first thing is to realize you're not necessarily the smartest guy in the room all the time.
Great. Well, we thank all of you for joining us this evening, and our panelists and all those aspiring to the service academies, those in ROTC, those who have served our country. I'd like to close with a couple of things. I'm doing some research. I found a passage that Herbert Hoover issued right after the death of President Roosevelt in April of 1945 to all the armed forces when he took over as president. His words were really powerful, and they were designed to encourage the troops as he became president, took over. And they really sort of speak to, I think, how we all feel about our servicemen and women. He said to them, quote, "Our debt to the heroic men and women in the service of our country can never be repaid. They have earned our undying gratitude. America will never forget their sacrifices. Because of these sacrifices, the dawn of justice and freedom throughout the world casts its gleam across its horizon." So we want to thank all of those for their service to our country, those who are with us, those who could not be with us, and those who have gone to a better place. And perhaps because it's who we are, we could ask Father Ono to just end with a prayer as we go about the rest of our evening and our lives. Father Ono?
Thank you for all of you who have contributed. And again, I would add my sense of saying thank you for your service and just for yourself and for all that you've contributed, especially tonight. I just wanted to, I think, reread that prayer of St. Ignatius. Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will. All I have and possess, you have given all to me, and to you, Lord, I return it. All is yours, dispose of it, wholly according to your will. Give me only your love and your grace, and that is enough for me, and I ask for nothing more. But your sense of self, your sense of making us better people so that we can serve the world. We pray this in Christ Jesus our Lord, in the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. God bless you. Hope to see you soon on another one of these chats. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Amen.